how do we really talk to people in a way that helps them understand that as a community of faith, we see their pain.
Mm-hmm.
We see that they have experienced things that did not follow the script.
Mm-hmm.
We see that they were left with broken places. We see that the way that we talk about it still does not answer to their pain,
Mm-hmm.
and that we're curious enough to ask why, or to ask more, or to say how come, or to say, let me know, like, help me understand where we're getting it wrong. Compassion requires us to do more than bear witness. It requires us to do more than just feel for the person. The piece that makes compassion not voyeurism or not pity or frankly not even empathy, which comes at its own cost,
Mm-hmm.
is the third piece, which is the doing. Compassion requires us to do something. And so it only really is truly compassionate where what you have witnessed has impacted your heart in a way that requires you to take action.
Welcome to Above the Noise, Dr. Kerry King,
Yeah.
clinical psychologist and friend and daughter of other friends. So we go back a couple generations,
Generation.
and we have been talking about this topic for a long time. And finally, we're here in Barbados, and we're able to get together for a few minutes and just talk. So this is just going to be a conversation. We have one topic we want to talk about, but we may get into other things. It's all right. So, Kerry, introduce yourself to our audience.
Sure. Hello, and thanks for the invitation. I am, like you said, Kerry King. I am a clinical psychologist, Barbadian born. Much of my life has been spent outside of Barbados in the United States, where I did my studies. My career, I will say, has been at the intersection of substance use treatment and mental health treatment. So, co occurring disorders, that's really where I have spent much of the last 20 years. And as a person who really grew up in a Christian home under pretty strict orders of conduct, didn't really know a lot about substance use and stumbled into it and found that it was a really authentic space, both in terms of the community of individuals that you work with, those seeking care, but also the people who often themselves were in recovery and wanting to give back, and would enter the treatment space. So I always say much of my education I got from people in recovery after I already had a doctorate, because those were the people who taught me what it was actually like
Life on the
to,
street,
yeah,
where the
yeah, to
rubber
be
meets the
where
road.
the rubber meets the
Yes.
road, what it actually felt like for your body, your spirit, your relationships to be in recovery from something as just all around assaultive as a substance use disorder. So that's where I kind of ended up by accident, unless you believe in divine providence, in which case then maybe it wasn't an accident. And that's where I have largely stayed. My role has changed. It's become less clinical over the years and become more of an executive role. I have been head of clinical for various organizations in the United States. And now I consult for a Philadelphia based firm that I would say is largely a government relations firm. So a lot of the work that we do is in helping states and federal partners implement best practices related to quality care for mental health disorders and substance use disorders.
Do you still have a private practice, or is most of your time right now with the consulting and that aspect of it?
I don't currently have a private practice. I actually had a private practice for very many years, but no longer. I think right now my private practice is just doing work in community.
Mm-hmm.
So it's no longer one-on-one. I find I do a lot more showing up and being willing to talk to community groups and church organizations, and that feels like my private practice. I think my arc career-wise and just kind of interest has moved away from the individual per se, and has become more about the systems in which
Mm.
individuals operate. And so I didn't think of it until you just asked me, but that That also is probably the reason why I'm not doing private practice right now. I'm more interested in talking to people in the context of their community and the spaces that they live and work and function. Like my career in running systems and supporting clinical development in systems has shown me that the dynamics of the interplay between people has as much to do with us being okay as anything that's happening inside of a particular person.
So the community, what's happening in the community affects us
No,
more
absolutely.
than we realize
Yeah,
sometimes.
we are dynamic bodies in communion with each other, and if we forget it, we will only ever get half the cure.
So as a psychologist, clinical psychologist, how have you found that to be accepted or challenged within the faith community?
Oh Lord. I can't tell you how many times I've sat in church and heard the assault against people who have doctorates or people who think they know more than God. It just I mean, I think it's at the point where I personally find it amusing almost. I think earlier when I was younger, maybe I would find it offensive because I didn't understand it. I didn't understand what there was that seemed to be this perceived threat about you either had to pick God or science.
Right.
It felt like a bizarre dichotomy to me that was not necessary. But I think that it happens on the other side too, where the scientific community, if you will, also is suspicious of faith. And so there are a few of us who live in this space where both sides of our world are suspicious of the other side.
Mhm.
And how do you sit in the middle of that context and kind of hold space for both of them, knowing that neither one of them is particularly trusting of the other?
Mhm.
Uh, mm.
So how do you navigate that?
I mean, I think I've really gotten good at what did Johnny Cochran say? If it don't apply, let it fly. I
Mhm.
think that I have just become good at that. I can sit in a sermon and listen to the pieces that resonate with me and hear the pieces that might otherwise be offensive and kind of acknowledge that they are not for me. I think I am a person who's realized that I have to that there's something very true about asking God for yourself
Mhm.
and knowing for yourself. And so there may be times where I hear something and I wait for conviction. I don't, but I also wait for revelation.
Mm.
So if it doesn't apply, I don't necessarily find it offensive. I might find it not applicable.
Could some of it also be due to just mere ignorance ignorance in the true meaning of the word
Sure.
ignorance, can knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. In both contexts, right? In either space. Yeah, sometimes you hear things said about science or said about psychology that you know aren't true. So it's the same thing I tell my child, right? If it is said about you, but it is not true about you, then it is not about you. And I think that's how I feel about psychology too.
Yeah, that's a really good premise. You've got to learn how to differentiate what applies to you or not, and
Yeah.
not carry the burden of things that you don't need to be carrying.
Said and done, right? But you say
Yes.
it enough, maybe you start getting better at doing
Yeah,
it.
and you
So,
do it enough, you
right.
get to the point to where it becomes a part of your actions and
Yeah.
part of what you do and how you represent a
You're building
community.
muscle. Yeah.
Yeah. And that is interesting because, one of the things that has come up even as I've started this podcast and I've been talking to my two podcasts and talking to doctors and therapists and psychologists and all scientists as well as patients and practitioners of faith, and people are coming to realize that this discussion about health and
Hmm.
mental health
Oh, yeah.
and support in mental health and how our life, we're complete beings. We're not just physical and spiritual, we're
Right.
also mental. People are becoming more comfortable, or at least it appears to me as a non-practitioner. My buy-in is a patient and a podcaster. That's my
Mhm.
buy-in, right?
Right.
Patient and
Yeah.
podcaster. I'm not a practitioner or a therapist or a doctor. But it seems to me that people are getting a little bit more comfortable about talking about these issues within
Mhm.
the context of faith, whereas maybe years ago it was that doesn't apply here.
Right. Yeah. I would say so. I think there's still a misunderstanding, maybe, or maybe it's better to say that there is a desire for things related to mental health to lack complexity. Um, in that, if you have a cancer diagnosis, you understand that the treatment might be prolonged, it might require multiple trials, it might require consultation with different types of specialists, different treatment options, but you persist until you get it right.
Mhm.
I think part of the disconnect is that we don't really understand what the mind is. So disorders of the mind are a little bit like it kind of feels nefarious. Like, what are we talking about?
Right.
And I think that we have believed that some things that are mental health related are devotedly a spiritual
Mhm.
origin. And so, but increasingly, I think that people are beginning to recognize probably a couple things. One is that the brain is an organ
Mhm.
and it can misfunction like any other organ in the body.
Mhm.
So there's that. And then I think that the other thing is that people are realizing and beginning to accept that there's a lot less shame when we acknowledge that there is a universality to suffering. Bible chronicles a lot of distress, right? A lot of
Mhm.
people in the Bible that we hold as our examples were super transparent
Mhm.
about the extent to which they were experiencing grief, anxiety, and depression
Mm.
and
Despair.
self-doubt.
Yeah, doubt,
Yeah,
yeah.
right? Like, and that
Mhm.
is just examples of people being human. So there's some ability to see that and recognize those examples and recognize that because there's this universal experience, it's not just me. Oh, maybe we could do something about it.
Right.
So there's certainly elements of that, I think, that influence more adoption of getting help when the distress is caused by something, a disorder of the mind, if you will.
Mhm.
Where I started when I said that we like it to not be complex, though. We want it to end quickly,
Quickly, right.
right? And so I will have people ask me, so what do I do for anxiety? And they want me to give them something
Mhm.
really quick that they could do in the moment and that it will solve it for good. And I think to myself, even if you broke a bone, you would not say it to
Right.
your orthopedist, like, tell me over the phone how to set this,
Right.
right? Like, you never would.
Right.
But because it's a disorder of the mind, we have this expectation that it's something we should be able to handle on our own, and that it should happen quickly. It should resolve quickly.
Right.
And that's not necessarily
That's
true.
not necessarily true. We had a conversation a while back and just talking, and you mentioned this concept of compassion and
Right.
something that you had been asked to give a talk on and that you
Mhm.
presented it within a church concept. And I
Right.
thought it was very, very, very interesting.
Mm.
And I wanted us to spend some time while we're together here just
Sure.
chatting about this concept of compassion and how you see it and how you presented it and how sometimes we get it right and how sometimes we miss the boat.
Yeah. I mean, complex, right? So at its simplest form, and this is not originally mine, but I view compassion as kind of a three-legged stool. So the first piece of compassion is bearing witness to it, right? So first you see.
Hmm.
You have to see and recognize that somebody is experiencing suffering. So just basic human awareness of that. And I've come to think that another piece of that that's important to point out is there needs to be clarity around what you're seeing.
Mm,
So the element of what we're doing, education, having conversation, leaning in with curiosity, asking for permission to know more, not assuming that we know what somebody else's experience is.
mm,
Like that's a part of seeing accurately. So
okay.
first you see, then you feel. That's the second part. So what you have seen, what you have observed evokes something in you.
Hmm.
Now, in Barbados, we have this saying where we say it's kind of like in the South, how people say, oh, bless your heart. In Barbados, we say Kadir.
Hmm.
And so in my mind, Kadir is pity, right? Like, so I see that you are suffering. I see that you are in distress and I feel for you. but what I feel might just be pity.
Right.
So compassion requires us to do more than bear witness. It requires us to do more than just feel for the person. The piece that makes compassion not voyeurism or not pity or frankly not even empathy, which comes at its own cost,
Mm.
is the third piece, which is the doing. Compassion requires us to do something. And so it only really is truly compassionate where what you have witnessed has impacted your heart in a way that requires you to take action. And at that point, then it's truly compassionate.
Okay. So bearing witness, seeing,
Hmm.
then feeling,
Hmm.
and
And then doing.
not just pity, but
Yeah.
genuine feeling,
Yeah.
and then doing. But you also mentioned something that I thought was interesting,
Hmm.
and compassion, not empathy.
Oh,
What is the distinction you make there between those two?
yeah. So empathy is almost and can be an over identification with what somebody else is going through,
Mm.
but maybe in a way that makes it feel like it's your problem,
Mm.
right? And so when we talk about in clinical spaces, we talk about like compassion fatigue, which v- in reading about this more, because I genuinely became curious in reading about it more. One clinician noted that maybe we should call it empathy fatigue and not compassion fatigue,
Mm.
because empathy in a way makes us feel like this. What we feel is this is our problem to solve,
Right.
right? Like it is mine. I am now carrying the emotional burden of your pain. And that is not what compassion is. Or I'm carrying the emotional burden of your pain in a way that does not allow me to set limits for myself.
Okay.
And that is also never true. The difference is that compassion gives us perspective on why you are experiencing what you are experiencing in the way that it's hitting you.
Hmm.
And then it allows us to support you in making progress from that spot in a way that progress is still defined by you.
Mm.
I don't get to
Okay.
tell you what
Okay.
progress is.
Progress is defined by the person
The person who is having the
that
experience.
not by us saying, well, you should have made progress by now.
Yeah, I can't have more attachment to the outcome than you. Again, I told you that everything I learn in practical application. There was a gentleman that used to work with me years ago, and he had a saying that was pretty famous. He would say, Doc, I'm prepared to do anything I can to help anybody in here, but you know what I'm not going to do? I'm not going to shove a mule up a ladder.
Hmm.
Like the visual always stuck in my head, right? It was like, I'm gonna work hard, I'm gonna do everything, but I'm not shoving a mule up a ladder. And I've used that so much in teaching and in working with, I used to supervise doctoral interns a lot. And when you start this work, you're always trying to figure out, like, am I doing it right?
Hmm.
And one of the things that I would say is when you feel like you're shoving a mule up a ladder, that's probably a cue to reassess your approach.
Hmm.
Yeah, it can't feel like that.
Yeah, maybe too bought in.
Yeah, you're doing too
Too
much.
bought in. So how does this apply then? Let's take this again, seeing, feel, and doing.
Doing.
How does it apply in reality? How can a person apply it in reality, um, in their faith community, in their workplace, in their homes, wherever they are?
Yeah. So all of my examples always come from what I've witnessed.
Hmm.
And I'm always worried I'm gonna tell too much of the story, but I'll tell the story. I went to service yesterday and it was my marriage ministry Sunday or something like that. And it was such an interesting experience, right? Because the person who was delivering the sermon, he's talking his talking points and following his PowerPoint, and the congregation is having a conversation. And I feel like this is such a
At the same
Caribbean
time?
at the same time,
Wow.
such a Caribbean church experience, right? Like they're talking, he's talking and they answering. And when they think that he has it right, he's getting the amens and the affirmations, but they're being very clear when they think that he has got it wrong, right?
Wow.
So he's talking about, basically the man as the head of the house and how he's to be referred to and so on and so forth. And these ladies who are around me are saying, basically, if he treating you right, and then right,
Contextualizing it,
contextualizing it, right?
yeah.
And then they're like, he's talking about the example of being, Joseph being Jesus' stepfather and what stepfathering should be like if you find yourself in that position. And these ladies are like, yeah, but not taking care of your own kids. And I'm listening to this, and I just found it
Yeah.
intriguing, right? But when you listen to what they were saying, they were very clearly communicating their point of pain, right?
Mhm.
Like, I get that you are telling me the example of what this should look like. I'm telling you my
Mm.
experience. And my experience has to be honored if you want me to be receptive to anything that you're telling me. And so that might seem like it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, but it's an opportunity for compassion. Because what does compassion require of us? First, we see, right? So, like, wait, what are you saying? You're saying that this is not connecting.
Mhm.
Why are you saying that it's not connecting? For these reasons. What am I missing? What don't I understand about your experience that is causing you to break protocol and talk back to me about what I'm getting wrong in this sermon? And then what do you do? What would, and this was a visiting minister, so this is not his congregation, but how do you begin to speak to not just what why would consider to be the standard talking points, right? So God's blueprint for marriage or whatever the case may be, but how do we really talk to people in a way that helps them understand that as a community of faith, we see their pain.
Mhm.
We see that they have experienced things that did not follow the script.
Mhm.
We see that they were left with broken places. We see that the way that we talk about it still does not answer to their pain,
Mhm.
and that we're curious enough to ask why, or to ask more, or to say how come, or to say, let me know, like, help me understand where we're getting it wrong,
Yeah, or recognizing that half of your church is filled with single parents.
or that, right?
Yeah.
And that may be having a Sunday that is focused exclusively on marriage ministry, where the sermon starts with asking the people who are married to raise their hand and the unmarried people to raise their
Mm.
hand and the married people to be congratulated,
Right.
is perhaps not like, you're not creating safety.
Right.
And I will say, as a divorced person, I kind of ran the scan in my head. I told you I'm pretty good at,
Mhm.
but as I'm sitting there and I'm hearing, raise your hand if you are, I'm thinking, there is a segment of nothing that you're doing is wrong, but also what you are doing is really galvanizing in this moment. And you just let some people feel like they failed at a thing,
Yes.
right?
Creating failure.
Yeah.
So that brings us an interesting point because not only in like this context of marriage and singleness and that kind of stuff, but a lot of times people of faith want to do something in their community or they say, how
Yeah.
can I get involved? How can I
Yeah.
make things better?
Yeah.
Or our church wants to have a ministry or a
Yeah.
compassionate ministry. And and a lot of times we start out, well, we're gonna go and do this.
Yeah.
So how does compassion really work if we want to be effective in our community?
Right. What's the biggest criticism that gets lobbied against Christians? You hear the neighbor say, she is a Christian,
Mhm.
or the workmate will say, he is a pastor.
Mhm.
And it begs the question, what behaviors have they seen from us that call into contrast what they believe a Christian looks like
Mhm.
in comparison with the behaviors that they are seeing from us? And so we have to be so careful not to make compassion performative.
Okay.
There's a deep temptation to like kind of outsource compassion in a way that's performative. What might performative compassion look like? And I want to be careful here because you know I got a lot of opinions and many of them are not endorsed. But
Welcome to the club.
safe company, right? um, you know, it's easy to give money. You could put money in the ministry offering plate and say, go be compassionate elsewhere.
Right,
Does that meet the definition, right? Like, I have parted with my money, but I have not done anything
right.
because compassion should change you,
Mhm.
but I have not done anything. So, what is the motive? What is the thing that is taking us from, so we see, then we feel. What is the thing that's taking us from feel to do? That's where our motive lives. And we have got to be careful when we get to the point where we are transitioning from feel to do, because that's where we become most vulnerable to being performative, right?
Okay.
Um, a easy way, so I'm going to stick a pin there and maybe tread into less dangerous waters. What I will say is that an act of compassion is being a consistently decent person to live next door to.
Okay.
Being a person who is able to say that they're sorry if they realize that they have done something that was offensive. Consider your impact on other people. Mind your business sometimes because you realize that interjecting yourself in some ways in a moment is more damaging than it is helpful. And so,
Mhm.
so I meet again that intersection when we transition from seeing feeling into the doing. What do we do? And those things do not require a missions budget. They don't require a compassionate ministries offering. They don't require any of that. They just require you to be human.
Mhm.
You see that there is a single mother who lives next door to you who is always racing home in the evening. I'll tell you an example of what I consider to be one of the most compassionate things from my own childhood. My mom was an elementary school teacher, primary school teacher, and she was one of those very hands-on people. And you know my parents, so you know
Mhm.
my mother was also very busy in the church.
Mhm.
So she would come to school and she was that teacher who stayed after school and she was doing charts and preparing her classroom. She was doing all of that. And then she would race home and try to cook and she would come back for choir practice or midweek service because you know the church wasn't open if my mother wasn't there, right?
Right.
She was often running to district office because she was on some kind of committee or she was always doing. And there was an older lady who went to our church, lived in our community, and was not anybody of particular means. But I remember ever so often she would call the school for my mother and she would say, Miss King, stop by, pass here on the way home.
Mhm.
And we would go and she would have her old-fashioned Pyrex dish filled with whatever and tied up with the little kitchen towel, you know, how we your
Mhm.
portable
Yeah.
transport. And I always think of that as something that is so deeply compassionate. It was not huge, right?
Mhm.
But as a mother myself, you know how many times I wish that somebody would give me a little food so I didn't have to think about what to feed my child in the evening because it's like one more thing. When you're already juggling all the balls, it's just one more thing. And here was this person who maybe comparatively had fewer means, but she looked and she saw and she acknowledged that my mother was doing a lot. And also my grandmother lived in that community. And my grandmother was known as a woman who looked out for her children. So it was not that this woman thought that my mother didn't have anybody,
Right.
but she recognized that there was this thing that she could do that would make a difference. And 40 something years later, that stayed in my head, right? Like, whose child can you offer to watch because you know that they have to work late, they don't have a choice? Why don't you let them stay by me? I'll give them a snack after school until you come home because they're not sitting in the house. They're less vulnerable to predators. They're not on the internet scrolling. They're not doing all of those things. It's not big. but it's deeply compassionate.
Mhm.
And so in my mind, I kind of feel like those are the things that matter. There's a level of disconnection, I think, particularly from boys who are super vulnerable to what I'll call criminal enterprises.
Mhm.
And we should study gangs.
Mhm.
Gangs have figured this out.
Mhm.
They understand what is fundamental to like human desire, right? We want connection. We want a sense of belonging. We want to understand that we have the capacity to do something that will gain respect.
Mhm.
Um,
And we make people feel as though they belong. We're inclusive. Gangs are
absolutely,
inclusive.
absolutely
You have a purpose
inclusive.
here.
You have a purpose, good, bad, or indifferent. You have a way to support yourself, right? You got a little money in your pocket.
Right.
I was talking to a young man the other day and I was asking him how he feels about his prospects. And he was saying, not good. The fight to be a young person, to go to school, to stay in school, to pay for books and petty fees is so much of a higher hill to climb than to accept the $100 from the drug dealer who said, you ain't got nothing, hold this $100 for your pocket.
Mhm.
But then that $100 comes with, hey, hold this £5.
Yeah. Strings connected.
$400 is yours, is mine. Whatever you make after that is yours, right?
Mm.
It's so tempting when you have nothing to not lean into the something that's being offered. We have not figured out how to counter that because we are afraid of that young man, or we think that he don't want to hear nothing from us, or
Mhm.
for whatever reason,
Or we want them to be perfect before we accept them.
or we want them to be perfect before we accept them. And so they do not have a counter argument in their head. There is not another place that they find safety and affiliation. So you go with the option that you have.
Mhm. So you said two things there that I want to get back to. You said we should study gangs, and I 100% agree with that because they have figured out that integration, they have figured out inclusiveness, they figured out we may say that their outcomes are negative,
Sure.
but we shouldn't throw the baby with the bathwater. The process that they use for
Yeah.
inclusion is very, very effective. So I've said that many times. I also said that we as people of faith need to study bars. We need to go into bars and rum shops in the Caribbean
Yeah, yeah,
context,
yeah.
bars in the American context, pubs in the European
Sure.
context, because those are places where people can go as a total stranger, and within a
Exactly.
very short amount of time, they're part of a community.
Have
There's
affiliation.
somebody to talk to.
Correct.
There's, not just the bartender who communicates with them, but I've observed it many times in my travels and being with workmates who drank and stuff like that. And I would now, I'd always be the designated driver, but I would watch how the interaction begins to happen in those places.
Yeah.
And then I go to church, even as an ordained minister, and I see how how hard it is for us to do that step of inclusion because they're accepting without knowing the person at all. It's just
100%.
contextualization. We're here. Some people call it affinity groups.
Yeah.
Some of my friends started affinity groups. They're very effective. But it's like an affinity, right? The thing that brought us here, some people to drink, some people they want community, their companion, they may be out of town, or they're like a child you're talking about who may need that sense of feeling, that sense of belonging, and they are accepted without condition.
Yeah. There is no hill to climb first.
None.
Yeah.
So we look at them and we say, we shouldn't go there. That's bad. That's bad. Yeah.
Mm.
Well, the outcome may be bad, but the process is something that we can
Yeah.
learn.
Yeah. Yeah.
The second thing you said that I thought was very important is the example you gave of the lady in your neighborhood who helped. Sometimes people want to be compassionate. People want to do something. And so many times we want it to be programmatic, like you talk
Yeah.
about performative.
Mm-hmm.
But so many times, getting back to your first point of seeing,
Mm-hmm.
she saw something in the community, didn't have to have a committee meeting,
Yeah.
didn't have to go and ask her pastor, didn't have to start a program, didn't have to get a budget.
It's just,
Said, this is some place that I think I could help.
Yes.
And many times, for our viewers, we just want that we're trying to get across here that there's so many things you can do without having to have a program or a pastor or a committee or a church
Yeah.
by just observing what's going on around you and how can I be a help? How can I be a compassion to people?
Yes.
And like you said, it didn't take thing and the means difference might have been different, but the fact is I can do this. And
Right.
they reached out to that person and said, not I want to help you,
Yeah.
but I'm
Here.
just doing this
This
for
is
you
here.
out of the goodness of my heart.
Yes.
There's no reciprocity
I
in
don't need
return. And
anything.
sometimes people of faith, we get into reciprocity saying, well, we have given, 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 and they haven't come to church.
Yeah.
Well, who
Because
said
we
they
want
have
a
to come to
return.
church?
And we also think,
So we have an ROI, right?
right, yes, there is no return necessarily, or the return may not look like you anticipate. And we also link the conversation around compassion to the less fortunate. Says who?
Right.
Again, when we link the what we feel to what we do, and we talk about being performative, why do we want to do something for somebody that we consider to be less fortunate? Now, hear me clearly. There's nothing wrong,
Wrong with that.
right? But there's this certain sense, and I forget what her name is. It was Rachel, Naomi. I can't remember, but she talks a lot about the stance of the helper. The sense that as a person who is helping, you have to beware the sense that you are in an elevated position doing something to somebody for someone lesser than you are. And I don't care who you are. Nobody likes the sense that they are being treated as less
Lesser,
than.
less than.
Like, I don't
Right.
care what you're doing for me. If it comes with having to feel like less than you in order to get it, then I will resent it at
Right.
some level, because are you not also reinforcing my sense of shame? Because I could not help myself. The other thing about what that old lady did that was amazing is that by typical metrics, she was not doing it for somebody who was less fortunate than she,
Right.
right? It was just truly an act for someone that she could help. Help.
Regardless of their status,
Yeah.
regardless of where they were.
Yes.
And because sometimes that thing, we have to do something to help the person who's lesser than us, we ignore the fact that there may be many opportunities to help people who are on the same level of us, or people
Right.
who may not, you may consider better than, well, a higher status than you. Compassion doesn't necessarily require status.
No, it does not. It does not. So this, I think is just an interesting example, because sometimes we don't set out to do something that is systemic, but it can become systemic by accident. Oh, one day it occurred to me to look at the practice of Caribbean people packing barrels. So when we live in the diaspora, packing barrels and sending them home. And particularly in living in the Pennsylvania area, I ran into a lot of Jamaicans. And we all do it. I think not just Caribbean people, I think we all do it, but I feel like Jamaicans do it with a different level of gusto, right? I don't think there's anybody that could pack a barrel like a Jamaican. And I got curious about, like, what impact do you have on that? Because when you think about one of the big vulnerabilities of poverty is food insecurity. And if you think about it, packing a barrel does not require much of us. So I go into Giant or, Costco or wherever, and they're selling 6 cans of tuna for $3. And I buy 6 cans, but I only need two. So two for my cupboard, four for the barrel, right? Buy one, get one free at Target, laundry detergent, one for me, one for the barrel. And something that in the grand scheme of things does not cost me a lot, particularly if I do it over time. And then you pay, well, I don't know what it is nowadays, but pay $100 and you ship the barrel home. And that barrel that you have shipped that required nothing of you impacts the food security of somebody or somebodies
Hmm.
in your
Usually
community.
more than one.
More than one,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of the time, what I realized too, and why I call out Jamaica specifically, is because I know, we might send home a barrel because we sending it. You moved overseas and you left your mother and you sending it to your mother. But so many times I would see them do it and they were just sending it back to their community. Their entire family had immigrated, but they were just sending it back because they was aware that my kids outgrow pajamas or summer clothes, and I pack them and I send them down, right? Um, so I got curious and I started looking, and this is not just barrels, but when you look at the remittances, so whether it was barrels or money or whatever, if you had a guess about how much, what the financial impact of that was, what would your guess be?
I would probably guess in the hundreds of millions.
Billions. Billions. Blew my mind. I can't remember the exact number, so I don't want to say a number, but it was in the billions because I remember the bee catching me off guard. And when you think about it, something that is so inconsequential could have $1 billion impact on an economy. Me and you doing that.
Yeah.
No, there's opportunity there, right? Because there's also studies that say, well, if you don't get the systems in place so people could afford to clear the barrels, so people could afford to transport the barrel, so the government is not charging them too much on import
Yeah.
taxes. There's
All of
things
those
that have to be
logistical
solved for.
issues. Yeah.
Sure. But the fact is that there is billions of dollars in potential impact from something that cost me.
Very from a lot of small things, a lot of
Right.
small actions together cumulatively, and not just
Yeah.
billions of dollars, but thousands of people.
Thousands of people. Yeah. And so small compassionate acts can certainly be leveraged in ways that have systemic transformational impact, but they don't have to start out that way.
And they don't always have to be one person.
Indeed.
There's many people doing lots of small things that bring the impact.
Yeah.
Well, then we can go on talking about this for a long time because I think, understanding compassion and really bringing it home to the little things we can do and taking out the performative
Mhm.
aspects and the status aspects and all that kind of stuff is because a lot of people that are people of faith are saying, what can I do to help my community? What can I do to help there? And typically the answer is right before them, but we've been
Yeah.
taught to look towards a system or
Right.
towards a person or towards a group or towards a nonprofit.
Yeah.
Whereas your ability to help may not be in any of those. It may just be that neighbor across the street or that child down the road,
Right.
or you can volunteer to help kids with lessons after school.
Sure.
You may have been a math teacher, you may know math, or you may know
Absolutely.
science, the things that kids struggle with, or with reading. You could help kids with reading 30 minutes after school. It doesn't take anything to sit down in your house or to sit down in your veranda and you talk to that. So helping people to understand that your acts of compassion doesn't have to be institutional or
No.
large
No.
or systematic. Sometimes when you're asking God, I preach this all the time. When you're asking God, what can I do? Sometimes He's already put the answer in front of
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And it's just not packaged in the right packaging that we have been mentally prepared to say this is
Sure.
how it should package. It may be in a brown paper bag.
Yes.
But He's saying, your answer is right there.
Yeah. Right
Well,
there.
Lord, what do you want me to do? Right there.
This little thing.
But that's a brown paper bag. It ain't blue. Right there. Right?
Right. Yes.
And that may seem funny, but what is simple is start where you can.
Start
The
where you
principle
can.
is start where you can.
Yeah.
Start with what's in front of you. You don't have to go on a
Yeah.
$1,000 campaign to raise money to help a child learn how to read.
Yeah. I
You
mean,
know.
it's the example that has been kind of rattling around in my head is um, departing in the Red Sea, right?
Hmm.
And what did God basically say? He was like, "What do you have in your hand?" And he was like, "I can't part. You see this whole big able sea? What you expect me to do?" And he says, "What do you have in your hand?" And I imagine that the non-pretty, non-King James version translation was, "You mean this piece of stick? What am I
Right.
supposed to do with this?"
Right.
But like that piece of stick was the entryway into saving a nation. That I think you just never know how, when you use what you have in your hand, how that impacts a nation. But you gotta do something.
You do something. That stick may be more than you think it is.
Yeah.
So I want to switch here again as we turn the corner. I know that you you are planning a conference here in Barbados, and it's coming up here. So I want to give you a little bit of time to talk
Sure.
about that and what
Appreciate
you're
it.
trying to do.
First, you're giving me an opportunity to correct a misconception. It's a global conference. It's not
Yeah.
in
See?
Barbados. It's a virtual conference. It is occurring on June 3rd and 4th, 2026, and it's online. It's the International Institute for Community Wellbeing. And part of the reason why we decided to focus on community, I told you that in my work, I do a lot of systemic work. I'm helping governments figure out, how to craft policy and how to help providers understand how to implement and how to measure success and how to do all of that. But everything that we know about the data tells us that a sliver of the people who are in distress show up in the system of care. A sliver.
Mhm.
And so that means that most of those people are existing in our community and will never interface with what we would consider to be the behavioral health or mental health care system. And there are also people who are not experiencing what you might consider to be diagnosable distress,
Mm.
but are experiencing life is just hard. I turn on the news and I feel overwhelmed by what I see as policy decisions that I think are impacting me, or I'm seeing murders, or I'm being worried that, what does it mean that we woke up in Barbados and I happened to be here a few months back and we woke up one morning and our airspace was closed. And I think that that hit Bajans pretty hard because it was like, "Wait, what? What happened? What do you mean our airport, our airspace is closed? What? We didn't do anything." But I think it was such a clear reminder that in this time, there's so many dynamics happening around us that we do not control, but that impact our perception of if we're safe and if we're okay,
Mhm.
and like of what will happen next and all of those things. And that kind of distress may not necessarily show up in the mental health system. It may not knock on the door of the mental health system, but it impacts the way that people think, the way that people feel, the way that people show up as parents and partners and employees and drivers on the road merging into traffic who angry and like it
Yeah.
just shows up in life. And so for all of these reasons, we really wanted to focus on what what is occurring in our communities that cause distress, what's happening there, and how do we tackle it? Because the other thing that is kind of more prevalent in this time than ever is noise. Everybody got an opinion. Everybody is posting. Everybody is an expert. Everybody has something to say. And the problem with 30-second sound bites is that they tell you enough to draw you in, but not enough to help you understand what to do about it.
Right.
So we're living in this age of sound bites and too much information, but nobody's really clear on what is driving this? And are there things that we could do? Because the work of the people who put out the flashy thing is to catch your attention and to activate your system, right?
Mhm.
But once your system is activated, how do you feel like you are okay to go about living in this world?
Right.
That's really a lot of the premise behind the International Institute for Community Wellbeing. It looks at what we call globe sourcing solutions. So if I am sitting in Chicago and I find that I am a community who is struggling with racial tensions and feeling like we need to grapple with racial healing, I might try to reinvent the wheel, or I might ask myself, are there other communities around the globe that have had to come to racial reconciliation? South Africa probably has,
Mhm.
right? Germany probably has. What do they know that they could teach us? If we are worried about criminal enterprises taking over the lives of young people, and we ask ourselves, how do we battle with this? There are communities that have been dealing with the cartel and the mafia and
Mhm.
for generations, but have found ways and means to take care of their young people and point them in a direction that's productive and beneficial in spite of that. when we look at systems where there are no psychiatrists, there are no psychologists, but they have created a way to rally around women who are experiencing trauma and leverage small resources to allow these women to build a way of sustaining themselves and their children. If we want to solve for that, maybe we should go ask them.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of those things coming together that's really fueled this conference. So ironically, the conference is really driven by compassion, right? Because first we see, so we want to do some accurate understanding of what is driving all of this. Help me to understand what it is that I'm seeing. And then we feel a true sense of like what is happening for others, opening up our capacity for concern, but then helping people to understand what they can do, big and small solutions. What can you do? So that's what we're going to spend 2 days in June doing.
And how do you get more information about it?
You could jump on our website. It is iicw-global.org. Or we also have an IICW global page on Facebook and one
Okay.
on Instagram.
Okay. Facebook and Instagram. All of them are IICW.
IICW, International Institute for Community Wellbeing.
Okay. And that is virtual, so anywhere in the world you can log
Any,
on.
anywhere in the world, you can log on
Is it
from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. on June 3rd and 4th. Register ahead of time so we can send you a Zoom link.
if people want to get in touch with you or get more information about Kerry King and the work that you do, or maybe even your consultation or your work, how do they do that?
Sure, you can jump on my webpage, which is the King Institute, and that's just thekinginstitute.org.
That's a great name. Okay, yeah. KingInstitute.org.
King
The
Institute.
KingInstitute.org.
Now, there's another King Institute that is not me. This is specifically
The King Institute.
thekinginstitute.org. Yeah.
TheKingInstitute.org. And they can also email you
They
from
can,
there as well.
they can email me at either info@thekinginstitute.org or Kerry, Kerry, at
Okay.
thekinginstitute.org. Either
Okay.
one.
We will put that also in our show notes and places how people can get in touch with you.
Appreciate it.
So Dr. Kerry, thank you for the conversation.
Thanks.
I hope that you enjoyed it.
I
We've
did.
looked forward to it for a long time, and I think it was very, very good. I think our audience will find it to be very informative, just to help in those areas where we talked about. So, as we close, what are three things you would like people to take away from this?
Yeah. Um, Pay attention. So look around, notice where the opportunities are sitting right in front of you. Lean in with curiosity. Just ask the next logical question. If you see and you don't understand, or you worry that your intervention might be not appreciated, ask somebody's permission. Would it be okay if I? And then the other thing is be willing to take a risk. And we didn't cover this one, but I'll say this one. Sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is to let somebody know that they're not alone. And sometimes that looks like choosing vulnerability ourselves. So choosing to tell somebody your story so that they understand that the thing that they are experiencing is not peculiar to them. That sometimes is the most compassionate thing that we could do for another person.
Thank you, and that's a great point to end our session on. So, thanks again. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you.